Hey everybody and welcome back to Get On Board, this time with another episode of me responding to Jamey Stegmaier and his Sunday Sitdown talk. This week he talked about his favorite ways of testing your skill and his favorite mechanisms to do so. And at first when I watched the video I was totally confused, what does he mean? Then I was intrigued and now I'm super excited to do this video, so let's see what I have to add. I was not sure what Jamey meant when I saw the thumbnail of the YouTube video that he uploaded today. I wasn't sure, like, skill test. There's a lot of skill tests and I thought, does he mean actual skill set that you have to deliver to be good in a game, like flicking games and other dexterity games? And then I thought, oh, he might be talking about like the D&D stuff, which I was never a big fan of. I was never like the dungeon player or Dungeons and Dragons player. I've never played it once and that's not something I'm interested in. But as I watched the video, I thought, at first I thought, well, I might have nothing to add there. It's nothing that I'm very good at, nothing I can express my interest in. And I always want to add something from a consumer point of view and not from the design point of view, because I have no idea about designing games. But as I watched the video, I thought, no, well, I can say something to this particular game that Jamey talked about, or that game that he talked about, and, well, hasn't he have no chance to play this particular game? Because there are a few games that I was fully expecting to be on his list that I have here in front of me now that I want to show you and add to his list. So, let's start. What did Jamey say? There are a lot of several ways of skill testing, and he's looking for something that he wants to put in one of his next games, which I don't know, it might be his Civilization game or another game, I don't know, because he has always, like, I think, several games on his design sheet that he's working on at the same time. So the first thing I thought of when I heard the word skill test was this game here. It's Dungeon Fighter, and it was because skill test, I took it literally. So in this game, it's a cooperative game in which you try to go into a dungeon, which I am not super interested in the theme, but I knew that this was some kind of dexterity game. And in this game, you are rolling dice, like these dice here, and most of the time they are blank on every side, except on one side where it shows a success. But it's not so much about rolling those dice or on which side it ends up, but where do you roll this dice? Because there's a big target that gets put together in the middle of the table, and you throw it onto this target. And where it ends up, it's a little similar to what Jamey talked about with this bow and arrow example. So you want to try to get as close to the middle as possible. Definitely, that's logical, I think. But there are those holes, so they get in the way. So for example, if you land on this spot here, it's like a 3, might get it to a 2, but as closer as you get to the middle, there might be those holes in the way in different spots. And when a die falls into a hole, it's not on the target anymore, so it doesn't count as a success. And there are certain bonuses that get scored when the die lands on the face with this eye that triggers a special ability. But most of the hits that you have to do to a specific monster are where does the die end up, and not which side you roll on. So it's more like a skill test and less like a luck thing where the die rolls up to, which I particularly enjoy because then I get to challenge myself and my skill set at how good do I roll dice and not how fortunate I am at which side ends up. And there are a lot of things that might make the game more complicated, or the skill test itself, because some of the time you only can use your weak, or my left hand, or your partner has to take your hand and throw the die for you, which is super funny. Or you have to, I think one of the challenges is to throw it backwards over your shoulder and stuff like that. So it's a little weird. It's a little yeah, maybe a little clunky, but I really enjoy this, and this is for me the ultimate of, at least of the games that I have played, the ultimate skill test that I know of. Another game that came to my mind was very close to that was Escape, Curse of the Temple, where you have to roll dice as fast as possible to get to another room, find diamonds, and get out of the temple, and all in real time in, I think it's 10 minutes, and there's the soundtrack playing, so you're very rolling those dice very fast, very hectically sometimes. It's a very stressful game, and the thing that makes those skill tests for me fun is not like rolling the dice, because this is not a particularly skillful thing to roll the dice as fast as you can and hoping to get the right results. But there are some rooms where you flip over, where you encounter one of those curse cards, and you have to flip it over, and several things can happen. For example, you lose a die. That's unfortunate. There's nothing that you can do about. But sometimes you can't speak anymore, or you have to put a hand on your forehead and keep rolling, or like when dice get off the table and if they land on the floor, they are lost forever. So then your skill set is like pushed into one direction, because you have to roll the dice a little more carefully. And this is a thing I like, because it gives you the feeling of you have to be fast, but you have to be careful as well. And that's the thing I like very much. It's a subtle and small thing, but I like it. Then I don't like when games in skill tests more my luck than my skill set. I mentioned that before, and Jamey talked about time stories, and I love time stories. I love the story aspect of the game and the time travel aspect and the puzzles that you have to solve. But some of the times when it comes to those skill sets and you have to roll the dice, I just feel empty-handed, because rarely I can influence what I roll. And I had a lot of bad rolls in this game, so did my teammates. And I think, in a way, Time Story is designed this way. But this was the least fun part for me that I had in Time Stories. And there are better examples also that Jamey gave. And I'm not criticizing Jamey's pick of Time Stories, but just the way that, for me, Time Stories and the skill tests in Time Stories played out, it just wasn't for me. But he also mentioned Near and Far, and the predecessor, which was called Above and Below. And he also talked about, does a game have to tell me before I do the skill test what is the result going to be? Or do I have to find out myself? What do I enjoy more? And for me, I like when a game gives me a little bit of a hint. Like, for example, in Near and Far, you might encounter a monster, and do you want to try to persuade it to get to know you, or do you want to attack it? And then if you want to like do the harder way, like try to fight it, it might be a higher skill number that you have to roll than the easier thing. Maybe this was a bad example, but for example, you get to know a townfolk, and he tells you, I just got robbed. Do you want to ignore him? Then just roll a 3. You can ignore him, nothing happens. Do you want to help him get the robber, find the robber, give him back his stuff? Then you have to meet a very high threshold, a high skill test, like for example of 8. And then you have a little bit of information how this particular story might pan out in the end, which I like very much. And Jamey also talked about that you have to have, in this particular game of Near and Far, you have a fallback plan. He talked about those hearts in Near and Far that you can spend afterwards. And then one game that came to my mind that did a similar thing is Empires of the Void, also a game by Ryan Lockett, the same designer of Near and Far. And in this game, fighting it's a little bit like Scythe. You don't fight all the time, at least in the games that I have played. And you just increase your odds when you fight. You roll dice also, but like every one of those units that you can gather around you, they just give you more dice. But more dice doesn't necessarily mean that you get better. You just increase your chances because you don't add up, you don't do any math of the pips that you rolled. Just the best dice of your pool that you rolled is your result. And after that, you can add a card from your hand. You have a lot of cards in hand, and they all have a special power. I think it's a power number that you can add after you rolled the dice. So you can think, okay, I rolled a pretty high number, so I can go with a lower number of my card, but my opponent might know that. So, and then there's this back and forth. If he knows that I could win this game, this fight easily by playing this card and so on, and then, but if my opponent knows that, and then there's this game of cat and mouse, which I enjoy very much. It's also, if you play against a non-player character, then you also have to do those tests. But then I think it's only one card gets flipped, and this is the power that the NPC unit gets added to his die roll. So still, I have to make the decision after I roll. So I get a few informations in the beginning, and then I can do something about it. And not only my die roll is the result of the skill test. And one other thing I wanted to add, that because I think when it comes down to it, what those examples have in common, they are tied to the mechanism is tied to the skill test itself, very much so in Dungeon Fighter and in Escape, where you have to be more careful, or you have to hit a certain thing. But also, if the skill test gets me more into the mood, into the vibe of the game. For example, one game that I really much enjoy is ALCHEMISTS. In this game, you brew potions, and you're not sure what you are brewing, because the ingredients that you mix together, you might not know what ends up being the result. So what you can do, you can just sell it, and without knowing what you're actually selling, so you might have a tone for coming over to you, yeah, I want this drink, like an antidote. And you might hand him the total opposite, so he's very, very angry with you. But you can also like test it beforehand, and you can test it on some of your students, which nothing to worry about, because your student is drinking your potion that you have no idea what it might do to you. But if you want to, also you yourself can drink it. But then you yourself have to suffer the consequences. So you might lose a worker for a turn, or you might end up in the hospital, which ends up being the same thing. Or you also lose, I think you can lose victory points, because I think in the rulebook it says you get insane and you dance naked on the town hall place or something like this. It's very funny. And this way you have to improve your potion making skills, because you might suffer the consequences otherwise. And I guess it's not a real thing like those skill tests that Jamey talked about, but I still thought it was worth mentioning. And other than that, the only thing I could add to the mix was the exit games and the other how are they called, unlock games, because a big part of the game is a skill test. Getting out of a room, cutting things out, puzzling things in a way that you solve the room, the riddle, the puzzle itself to get out of something, to solve the game. But I like those types of skill tests also because they are very much tied to my skill. Achieving something, pattern recognition, or like solving a puzzle, because the skill set of the group that I was in made me do it, and not like a fortunate die roll made me do it. So I think the only thing I have to add in those exit games, for example, is I like because Jamey talked about also that skill tests want to emulate from the game perspective that there has to be a non-absolute certainty of you achieving this particular thing. And in Exit, this is done in a way you are supposed to solve this game. It's just the matter of minutes or hours that you are taking to solve it. But if you cannot solve the game or this particular puzzle, then you can draw help cards that give you a few hints. And you can draw another help card that give you a little more of a hint. And if you cannot do it by then, you might draw a final help card which will solve you this particular puzzle, so you can go on and solve another one. And this is a thing I think it's only can be applied to a few games, but I like when a game does not solve the puzzle or the skill test for you immediately, but it gives you a little push in the right direction. Just some random thoughts from my part, but those are the things that I came up with when I thought about skill tests. I think it's a very broad term in board gaming. In board gaming, in general, skill tests. There are a lot of different things, and I'm only talking about board games that are not Dungeons and Dragons influenced, although they might be, and I just don't know it. But yeah, I just found it interesting that first I thought I had nothing to add to this topic from Jamey, and now I'm like 15 minutes into talking about skill tests that I really enjoy. So I'm super happy that Jamey responded to me last time. Happy to do that. It's a lot of fun to actually give my thoughts on camera to him. And I hope you enjoyed watching, and see you next time on Responding Jamey. Thank you.